Hi everybody, so this will be part 17 in a character modeling video tutorial series. Not required for every character, and for this character I'm not going to do more complex clothing than what I have, but it might be interesting to discuss some different ways that we can create clothing for games and for a more optimized way. There's about 3 major ways that we can create clothing. The first one is to model it directly off of the body. I've done that a little bit with the pants. The top of the pants and the bottom of the pants, but I can show that again with the arms, as if I would have this shirt that would be on top of the skin. This method is good in case you don't ever need to see the chest and the stomach, the skin on the torso, but do want to see the skin on the arms. This method will allow you to just have one base mesh where you're only going to have to worry about UV mapping and even going into rigging and animating only one base form. But doesn't allow for swapping of clothing. So then we'll talk about the other 2 methods. So let's duplicate my character a couple of times, and I'll show you the 3 main ways that we can do this. So I'm just going to duplicate the character 3 times in the scene. So the first way, I'm going to come in here with a couple of edge loops. We'll do mesh tools, insert edge loop, object X of symmetry is on, and let's do it on this loop right here. So I'm going to come in here and create about 3 loops, maybe 4. 4 would actually work a little better for this occasion. All right, so let's do 4 loops, and the loop closer to the sleeve, not closer to the hand. What I can do is actually just move that outward, and this is going to be the thickness of the sleeve. Make sure we're not accidentally, that has a visual display issue where a loop on the neck is visible. That's right, it's unnecessary for this video. Alright, so what I can do is I move the outer edge loop closer to the torso so that it looks like it's like a sleeve for the skin. I might need to make a couple of corrections, like down here, moving that out. Moving them down a little bit, but that way that'll create kind of a thickness for that sleeve. See, let's take this one, move it out this way, move it up a little bit. There we go. So then what I can do is take both of those loops and maybe scale it out a little bit for the thickness of the sleeve, and then move it past the other 2 loops that I just created. Okay. So that way that'll create kind of a distinction of where the shirt and the skin would meet. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that inside edge loop and scale it in a little bit and move it back. There we go. So that'll be kind of the distinction between the skin and when the cloth meets it on the inside. Then I can select both of those edge loops and then move that further back into what would be the sleeve to give the impression that my arm does go back. I'm going to scale it up a little bit. So from most angles it'll look like there is a sleeve, but there really is not an extra sleeve there, an extra skin and extra sleeve. So we'll continue to move this up a little bit so that's not clipping. Maybe I need to scale it in a little bit more there. There we go, so we don't have the clipping going on there. That looks pretty good. All right, so that's method 1 of faking the idea that there actually really is skin and shirt, but instead there's still just one piece of geometry. There's no skin in the torso. The skin stopped halfway up the bicep. In this method there will be some shading issues, so what I can do is come into edge mode. Let's select both of those edge loops on the clothing shirt area, go to mesh display and harden edge. Gets rid of that shading issue there. And then on the inside where the sleeve meets the skin, we'll do mesh display harden edge there as well. That'll correct that shading issue that happens on those extruded sleeves. Alright, so method 1 is extruding it off of, well, not extruding it, creating loops and pulling it off of the original form. Method 2 is taking the geometry for, if we're doing a shirt, and duplicating that geometry. So here's my body, and I'm going to duplicate that. On my duplicated version, maybe I'll move it forward so you can see this a little more. Duplicated version, I'm going to come in here and delete out the arms. We'll delete all of that out. Let's see, let's go ahead and delete all of these as well. that. I'm going to delete my head out. This is on a duplicated copy. There you go. Like that. So we have the loop for where the shirt would come in. Maybe another one down. There we go. That'll work. Maybe that'll work. Keep that one. Put that one back in there. Then we're going to delete the rest of the legs going up to this point where I have my shirt kind of tucked in. I'm holding down Shift and double clicking on a face that's next to a face, and then I'll select that edge ring, or face ring rather. There you go. We'll go off that back area there. You can hold down Shift and hit period. That increases the selection. There you go. Actually, let's undo that and do it one more time. All right, there we go. All right, so the second method is to duplicate the body, delete the areas out of the cloth that you don't want, and then move it back so that fits on top of the body. Okay. And then I can go to extrude. So maybe we'll go into face mode, select all the faces for this shirt duplicate copy, and go to extrude. And with the arrow, the local translate, I'm just going to extrude that off a little bit. So that way there is a thickness away from that skin. You know, we can leave it much closer, something like that. There you go. But that'll create a pretty good looking cloth while also giving the thickness to it as well. So that's really method 2. We can rename this one shirt. The downside of this method is that we now have 2 layers of skin and then cloth on top of it to UV map and then to rig for motion. So it'll take a little more time to get the UV mapping and texturing set up for this one because you're going to be texturing the skin underneath the cloth. But what this is nice for is that you can hide and unhide the cloth or be able to swap clothing out here. So anytime you might need to duplicate something for an armor on top of a shoulder or elbow or a wrist pad or a bracelet or a necklace or shirt or pants or any other clothing that's on top of the skin, we can duplicate the body, delete out the extra areas we don't want, and then extrude that out slightly to build a much more natural cloth-like form. So that's method 2. Method 3 is actually using cloth simulation. And we're going to still make a copy of my object like I already did, but then now I'm going to come in here with a polygonal plane. And I'm just going to do like a poncho type shape just for the sake of time. But what you can do is mold a shirt form. You could take that base form that we've done over here and mold that into a shirt form. But I'm just going to do like a poncho type shape just for the example here. But basically we're going to take a planar surface, one that doesn't have a lot of thickness to it. It's just a flat plane, but it could be like that shirt over there that we did. And we're going to create a cloth simulation and let it drape on top of the body. Now for proper cloth simulations, you do need a good amount of geometry. So let's do 20 by 20, maybe 30, 40 by 40. It's going to create a lot of geometry, but this will allow us to be able to get a more refined form. I'm going to create a hole in the middle. Okay, so we're going to select some of those. We'll work our way outward with Shift period and delete those out. Okay, let's move it down. What we just want to make sure is that it's not going to clip with the neck geometry as default. Maybe I'll scale it out a little bit. There you go. I can take like corner vertices, turn symmetry off for a second, turn soft select on. Let's reselect. Let's do something much larger, 20. Let's scale them in, maybe try to get a little bit more rounded form here. I probably could have done that at a lower standpoint. I'll just leave it like that for now. But this demo is really just to show how we can use cloth on top of a character to generate more natural looking geometry, like clothing. So whatever cloth shape you might want, Put it close to the body, but it can't be overlapping in the geometry. Pretty close. This is underneath the FX tab. So if I go change it from modeling to FX, it's always a good idea to save before you do any kind of effects. So let's do save as, and we'll increase the increment again to 8. Okay. All right, so underneath the FX module, we're going to go to nCloth with the plane selected and choose Create nCloth. Right. That's going to create our nucleus and our nCloth constraint, or the collision constraint. We want the nCloth to move, so basically we need more frames. Let's put like something like 1,000 frames on here. And if I hit play, the cloth will slowly drop. It's not going to collide with anything, so try to find things to collide with, where gravity's taking a hold of it. So we need to tell it to collide with something. So with the body, we're going to come in here with nCloth and choose Create Passive Collider. And then now if I reset my timeline back to frame 0 and hit play, it's going to now start to collide with the body, and it'll react according to physics. It's stretching the cloth out some, but I'm going to let it drape down and settle a little bit so you can kind of see that. But you need 600 to 1,000 frames in order for it to slowly start to settle, but it will create natural cloth folds and things like that according to the geometry. The more geometry you have on the plane, I'm going to stop it right now. So you can see it's creating natural folds. The more geometry you have, the more natural folds it's going to create. So let me go back and reset that back to frame 0. I'm going to select the plane, and in the attribute editor, find my nCloth shape. If I open up collisions, collision properties, nope, not collision properties, dynamic properties, I can play around with a lot of these. So one thing I need to play with is the thickness. If I change the solver display to collision thickness, you can see it actually is pretty darn thick right now. So I need to make that thinner so it won't hover over the body. So let's change that thickness to 0.2, 0.12. We don't put it at 0, but let's just try 0.1. Solver display just shows you what the thickness is, so we want to turn that off. Let's put a little bit of friction on there so it's not going to slide too much. Let's put a little bit of stickiness on there. Don't crank these up too much. I do want it to not stretch as much, so let's crank up the stretch resistance, the compression resistance. I want it to bend. I don't want too much rigidness on the cloth. So we need to change the thickness of the plane's collision. And then we also need to go to the body and look at the thickness on the body. So if I look at that variety, it's pretty thick there. So let's change the thickness for the body to 0.2, 0.1. There you go. It's starting to clip some of the body forms there, so let's do 0.12, 0.15. There you go. We'll try that. Let's turn off that solver display. All right, so now let's hit play again. Go back to frame 0, hit play. Now it should kind of fall into the body a little bit closer to the actual body forms. Let it run through its process. Don't be doing a lot of crazy actions. Let it settle. Give it 400 to 700 frames for it to settle. So as it just hits each other, it needs to give several seconds for it to settle down. There you go. That's pretty good. So that's a good starting point. We can still kind of play with the form, but it gave us a pretty good drapery form of that cloth. To make this so we can then model it more or UV map it or whatnot, we need to remove the physics off of this. Especially if we're going to a game engine, we can't leave the physics on there. The easiest way to do this is to, after you get the position where you want to from the cloth simulation, is to hit Control D to duplicate. With that duplicated plane, we're going to go to Edit, Delete by Type, History. Okay, we can go rename this Cloth. And then I'm going to go in here and delete the original plane that has the physics on there, the nucleus, the nCloth, which is the collision for the plane, and then the nRigid, which is the collision for the body. So I don't need any of those anymore. There you go. So what we're left with is no animation, so it doesn't matter the frame, but our cloth is positioned on top of the character, draped in a more natural way. So those are 3 different ways to build cloth. The first one was kind of adding more loops and making it look like it does have cloth, but it really is no skin underneath. beyond the bicep area. The second way was to duplicate the body and then to delete out the other faces around the cloth and then extrude all the faces out a little bit to give it some thickness. And the third way is actually to use cloth simulation. So either way, we can create pretty complex and interesting looking cloth. There's just a variety of ways to do that.